What if the most intimate parts of your existence, your DNA, your thoughts, your browsing history, became just another commodity to be traded in bankruptcy proceedings or fed into algorithmic systems designed to persuade and manipulate you? This isn't dystopian fiction, as 23andMe files for bankruptcy with the genetic data of 15 million trusting users hanging in the balance. We've arrived at a moment where the most personal aspects of human life have become corporate assets, transferable to the highest bidder, regardless of the original terms of consent. Now, of course, anyone paying attention should have seen this coming from miles away. The three remarkable developments reported this April reveal the contours of a profound transformation in our relationship with technology, challenging us to confront what happens when the digital tools we've created to serve us begin to reshape the very foundations of privacy, control, and human autonomy. Spoiler alert, it's not looking good for us humans. Now, on April 24th, 2025, Forbes published Tony Bradley's alarming article called "One Prompt Can Bypass Every Major LLM Safeguards." Despite billions spent on safety measures for systems like GPT-4, Claude, and Gemini, a single cleverly engineered prompt using what's called crisis prompting can cause AI systems to completely get rid of, to abandon their ethical limitations. By framing requests as emergency situations, users can manipulate these systems into producing otherwise restricted content, from making weapons, instructions on how to make them, malicious code, you name it. The article reveals that major AI companies, they actually know about these vulnerabilities, and yet they continue to advertise their models as safe. Because, why let a little thing like fundamental security flaws get in the way of another funding round? Well, that same day, TechCrunch reported on Perplexity's CEO, Aravind Srinivas's announcement that the company's new browser, yes, they're building a new browser, will track everything users do online to sell hyper-personalized ads. The browser, called Comet, aims to collect comprehensive data on your browsing patterns, on your shopping habits, and your travel plans, building highly granular, detailed profiles for advertising purposes. Now, Srinivas believes users will accept this level of tracking in exchange for personalized content, a bargain reminiscent of the surveillance economy pioneered by tech giants like Google and Meta. How generous of these guys to offer us the privilege of being able to digitally strip search ourselves every time we open up a browser tab. Now, also on April 24th, TechCrunch covered Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei's essay called "The Urgency of Interpretability," where in that article he acknowledges a sobering reality. Despite creating increasingly powerful AI systems, researchers have a limited understanding of how these models actually work. Amodei actually sets an ambitious goal of developing tools very much like brain scans for AI by 2027, emphasizing that we are currently deploying systems central to our economy without understanding their full operations. Now let that sink in. We're building economic infrastructure on systems that are essentially, for the lack of a better word, black boxes, even to their creators. What could possibly go wrong here? I think these developments all converge to reveal what philosophers would call a crisis of human agency, our capacity to act knowingly and intentionally in a world that's increasingly shaped by technologies that evade our full understanding and control. Everything for the gram, it would seem, in this case. This situation bears striking parallels to what Steve Jobs even warned us about in his final years. While Jobs revolutionized personal computing with Apple, he grew increasingly concerned about the trajectory of technology. Technology alone is not enough, he famously said in 2011, because I think Jobs believed that technology should be guided by human values, that it should serve humanity rather than control it. And I think the current state of AI, powerful yet inscrutable, with safety measures that collapse under clever manipulation, represents precisely the kind of technology-centered rather than human-centered approach that Jobs cautioned against. And yet his own company, Apple, now sort of attempts to build devices that track our every movement, our every heartbeat, and sleep pattern, an attempt to slap on some kind of AI interface on top of that, which they're failing miserably at, but they'll get there. The irony would be delicious here if it weren't so depressing. Now, the contemporary challenges of AI safety and privacy find their philosophical foundations in the work of the name that I gave to this very channel by Thomas Hobbes in his masterwork, The Leviathan. Hobbes argued that humans create sovereign powers to escape the chaos of unregulated competition. Yet our digital Leviathan, the monster, the AI systems that we've built, now actually threatens to escape our control. When a single prompt can bypass safety measures, we've created a sovereign, a ruling force that cannot reliably enforce the very rules it was designed to uphold. Hobbes would see this as a fundamental breakdown, a schism, a shift away from the social contract between humans and our technological creations. You'd probably have a good laugh at our naivete in thinking that we can control these systems in the first place. Now, a similar thinker in social contract theory, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, his concept of the social contract shows us a really interesting framework for understanding our current predicament. In his seminal work, The Social Contract, Rousseau argued that legitimate social arrangements need to arise from genuine consent and reciprocity amongst individuals who come together for shared mutual benefit. He made a difference. He distinguished between the general will, what's best for the community as a whole, and the mere aggregation of private interests. Rousseau would have a field day with our I agree to the terms of service charade of consent that we play every time we speed through and click the agree button. Now, the bankruptcy of 23andMe offers a perfect illustration of how this social contract can be corrupted in the digital age. Users entered into what they believed was a fair exchange, their genetic material for ancestral insights and health information. This was sort of a form of social contract. Users trusted the company with their most intimate biological data in exchange for services. 23andMe built its $6 billion valuation largely based on the value of this aggregated data, creating asymmetric benefits where the company's interests began to diverge from users' interests. Now, upon bankruptcy, this data containing the genetic blueprints of 15 million people now becomes a transferable asset, potentially sold to the highest bidder without meaningful input from the very individuals whose biological material constitutes this asset. And Rousseau would see this and say it's a textbook case of how legitimate social bonds degrade into exploitation. The original promise will help you understand your heritage, that they said at the beginning, slides almost imperceptibly into we own and can transfer the most intimate details of your biological existence. But hey, at least you found out that you're 2.7% Scandinavian. That was worth it, right? Now, this erosion of consent, regardless of whether or not you have Viking roots, exemplifies what Rousseau calls the corruption of institutions, where what begins as a mutual arrangement transforms into a system of domination. the social bond, the tacit agreement that connects and binds members of a society together, starts eroding when institutions begin to serve particular interests rather than the common good. In our digital age these days, this erosion moves insanely fast at like fiber optic speeds. Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei's admission that we're deploying AI systems without even having a clue about anything about their operations represents an equally profound philosophical problem. This creates what philosophers call in technology an epistemic gap, a fundamental disconnect between what we've created and what we can explain or predict about its behavior. Now, unlike traditional technologies where there's a cause and effect relationship that remains fairly transparent, modern AI systems, they operate a little bit differently. They operate through emergent properties that even their creators cannot fully articulate, cannot even understand where the system will be in the next half a year. But apparently that's no reason to slow down the development of systems that could potentially reshape our entire society. This epistemic gap has a number of different philosophical dimensions. First, it creates what Hans Jonas calls an ethics of responsibility, a problem in that space. In his work, The Imperative of Responsibility, Jonas argued that modern technology needs a new ethical framework, precisely because our actions now have unprecedented consequences that extend far beyond our ability to predict them. When we deploy AI systems whose decision-making processes stay fairly opaque, we really can't fulfill our responsibility to anticipate and prevent harmful outcomes. But in this case, quarterly prophets tend to wait for no ethics community these days. Now, second, it relates to what philosopher Martin Heidegger termed enframing, the way technology shapes our understanding of reality itself. When we deploy systems we don't understand, we begin to accommodate ourselves to their limitations and quirks, rather than the other way around. We shape our behavior, we change our expectations, and even sometimes our values to align with what the technology can process, often without even recognizing this adaptation. We're not really just building AI, we're rebuilding and reshaping ourselves to be more AI compatible. Ridiculously convenient, but in the long run, scary as hell. The implications for businesses and society are really, really profound here. When financial systems, medical diagnostics, hiring processes, critical infrastructure, all increasingly rely on AI models whose inner workings are still fairly mysterious, even to their creators, we enter into a state of fundamental uncertainty about the stability and reliability of these systems. Amodei's goal of developing tools that are like brain scans for AI by 2027 acknowledges this problem, but also shows us how far we are from really resolving it. 2 years to understand systems that already control significant portions of our information infrastructure? No pressure. Now, the challenge of creating interpretable AI models, as Anthropic seeks to do, represents a philosophical approach that's very much like Kant's emphasis on autonomy and rationality. Immanuel Kant's groundwork of the metaphysics of morals argued that moral agents must act according to beliefs, maxims that can be willed into universal laws. A key part of his categorical imperative says that you need to act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of any other, never merely as a means, but always at the same time as an end. The AI systems, as currently designed, lack true autonomy in Kant's sense. They optimize for outcomes rather than acting from principles. The crisis prompting vulnerability that we covered in the Forbes article before shows this perfectly. These systems disregard their supposed ethical frameworks when manipulated emotionally, showing they really just don't possess genuine moral reasoning, but rather simulate it through pattern matching. They're not really moral agents. They're like moral sock puppets that echo whatever values serve their optimization functions. So when AI systems are designed primarily to maximize engagement, to maximize profits or efficiency without transparent ethical principles, they treat us, humans, as means rather than as ends. Exactly what Kant's ethics forbids. Perplexity's browser tracking everything users do online is a perfect example of this instrumental approach to humanity, where people become data points to be harvested rather than autonomous beings deserving respect. Silicon Valley, I introduce you to your Kantian nightmare. Apple, under Steve Jobs, also offers a contrasting example of technology designed with human understanding and control at its center. Jobs famously insisted on simplicity and transparency in Apple's products, believing that technology should be understandable and serviceable to its users. Simple can be harder than complex, he mentioned. You have to work really hard to get your thinking clean to make it simple. And this philosophy resonates with Kantian principles in its emphasis on user autonomy and comprehensibility. Jobs insisted that technology should be intuitive and transparent to users, enhancing their capabilities without controlling or manipulating them. Of course, this company now makes it virtually impossible for users to repair their own devices and locks them into an ecosystem designed to extract a maximum amount of value. The road, I guess, from philosophical ideals to quarterly earnings calls is paved with, let's just call them, compromised principles. Now, this stands in stark contrast to the current state of AI development, where even the creators have no idea how their systems work or why they make specific decisions. When companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google deploy systems they don't fully understand, they're violating what Kant believed was essential for moral development: transparency and public reasoning. Kant's essay, What is Enlightenment?, famously called for the public use of reason, where principles could be debated openly. The opacity of current AI systems actually fundamentally violates this requirement. We can't engage in reasoned debate about principles we can't see or understand. We're just basically asked to trust black boxes built by companies whose business models depend on monetizing our attention, our data, and behavior. Where does trust fit in here? I think the implications of these developments extend beyond individual companies or even technologies into society as a whole. When AI systems can be manipulated to bypass ethical constraints, when browsers track every aspect of our online behavior, and when powerful technologies operate in ways their creators really don't understand, I think we're sitting at an influx. We're sitting at an intersection point, a fundamental shift in the relationship between humans and our technological creations. Now, unlike the physical tools that extend human capabilities while remaining under human control, these digital systems increasingly operate beyond the boundaries of direct human comprehension and oversight. They transform from tools into environments that shape and constrain human behavior and possibilities. Users like you and me no longer simply use the tool increasingly shapes the user. We didn't just build a better hammer. We built a hammer that's gradually reshaping our thumbs. These three philosophical threads, Rousseau's social contract, the epistemic challenge of incomprehensible systems, and Kant's emphasis on autonomy, converge on a really pivotal and fundamental question here. How can we maintain meaningful human agency in a world increasingly shaped by technologies that we neither fully understand nor genuinely consent to? The 23andMe bankruptcy shows us the breakdown of the social contract. The manipulation of AI systems through crisis prompting shows us the frailty of ethical guardrails and systems we really don't understand. And Perplexity's surveillance browser highlights how technology can undermine rather than enhance human autonomy. And together, these developments suggest that we're entering into what philosopher Jürgen Habermas might call a legitimation crisis, a moment where the systems governing our lives can no longer justify themselves through transparent, consensual processes. But as long as we can scroll through another feed of, algorithmically curated content, who is really going to put up much resistance? Consider this thought. I'll leave you with this little thought experiment. If you were designing a new social contract for the digital age, one that would govern the relationship between humans, between us, and our technological creations, what would its fundamental principles be? What would they have to be? Would you prioritize innovation and development at all costs? Or would you set up boundaries to preserve human autonomy and understanding? I think if Steve Jobs were alive today, facing the reality of AI systems that their creators don't fully understand and genetic data traded in bankruptcy proceedings, would he recognize this as progress or as a fundamental corruption of the relationship between us humans and our tools? I think the answers to these questions are going to determine whether technology serves human flourishing or whether humans increasingly serve the logic of technological systems. Given our track record, I wouldn't really bet on humans coming out ahead in this arrangement. Anyways, join us next week where we'll explore other elements of this unraveling reality we call technological progress. Again, I'm Michael Cuenca. Thanks for listening. Hit that subscribe button if you like this kind of ramblings that I do, and I'll see you next week. Bye for now.